Hi everyone, welcome back to Cardvoyant. I am Kris and I'm your Cardvoyant, and today we're taking a little bit of a different look at our tarot tutorial topics because today we're going to be talking about choosing a tarot deck. Now, chances are, if you've been following the tutorials that we've been doing, you already have some sort of deck. But it's really an important thing to have a deck that you relate to and that feels right to you. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. Now, first of all, as you can see, I've got here a bunch of different tarot decks, and I sort of collected them over the years, and I didn't really mean to. It wasn't like I was trying to have a million different decks to go to, but this is just some of a portion of the decks that I have. This is the bulk of it, but I do have more than this. Um, Right now, we're in this middle of this, as I'm taping this, we're in the middle of this lockdown situation. So we're not able to maybe go places, or a lot of us aren't, to go actually looking for a tarot deck. And places you can find them is, like any bookstore. My local Barnes and Noble has them. Independent bookstores sometimes carry them. And also, if you have some sort of a new age or psychic shop around you, they'll usually have lots of different tarot decks along with, candles and crystals and whatever you're interested in. But right now, so many of us are going to go online and look for a tarot deck. And you can find them, of course, on someplace like Amazon, US Games. I'm not sure if they're still shipping right now, but they're a really good source. Even eBay and places like that. So, you can find them online. And when you do that, as so often when you're shopping online, it's easy to get overwhelmed. There are so many different tarot decks available out there by so many different people you may be familiar with. Some of my decks that I'll show you are people that you may be familiar with. And there are also a lot of artists out there who sort of dabble in tarot decks and or have created one or two decks, and that's kind of amazing too, and awesome if that is something that you're particularly interested in, or you have an artist that you follow, or sometimes certain tarot readers that are well known have produced decks as well. So there's so many out there. So where do you even begin? Well, a lot of it will have to do with what you're interested in, what appeals to you. Now, I've done all of my tutorials with the Universal Rider-Waite deck, and that's my go-to deck. That's what I almost exclusively read with these days. And there's a number of reasons for that. A lot of it has to do with the iconography. I mean, Rider-Waite is sort of the standard bearer in tarot now, and for a very long time has been. But even in these Rider-Waite decks, there are a few to choose from. The Universal that I use, there's one called the Radiant Rider-Waite Tarot that's a little bit more colorful, I guess. And then there are a couple others too that I'm sure if you're looking online that you'll come across. I really like this Universal deck because it's bright enough. It's just kind of perfect for me, but for you, it may be different. So let's talk a little bit about decks in general and reading with them. So for me, again, I'm going to go with something that's Rider-Waite or generally based on Rider-Waite, although we'll talk about some of the decks I have and how that's not always true. And the other thing that's very important for me, that I think is important for any reader, is to have something that you can easily manipulate. Now, this Rider-Waite Universal deck, and you can see it here. You can see that I have one that's ready to go. It's brand new. I just got it a couple weeks ago, and I haven't used it yet because you get familiar with your cards, and you don't want to use something different if you don't have to. but it's ready for when I need it. That after a lot of use, the cards get kind of dirty, but they also get too almost too pliable. You know, you've used them so much. Sometimes you'll get corners that are bent and those kinds of things, and then it's kind of ready it's kind of the time to move on to a new deck. I'm going to move on, obviously, to a deck that's the exact same deck. Um, so it is important to have something that you're familiar with, or that you're willing to spend time getting familiar with, because if a deck is not based on Rider Waite, it does take some time to sort of get up to speed on the meanings. And even though as you read, you will interpret differently, you know, you'll have your own interpretations and your guides will kind of come to know that, it is important to know where the artist is coming from. So what those individual decks mean. So the other thing that's really important is to be able to manipulate the deck, as I began to say. I've got a few decks that I was really excited about getting, some that I still kind of use every once in a while, but they're big, so they're hard for me to shuffle, or even to, you know, shuffle this way and just sort of manipulate. Sometimes they're very stiff, and that makes it hard too. You have to break them in like a pair of shoes or something. Sometimes I have one deck that I rarely use. I have used it, but I rarely use because it's small. And I knew that they were going to be smaller than usual when I bought it, but I didn't realize that it would be uncomfortable for me to use. There's also something about the way that the cards are made. The Rider Waite deck that I use has like a plastic kind of, you know, film on it, or um, whatever they do with cards. It has that sort of plasticky feel, and that works for me. It makes it easier for me to shuffle, and it also, they last longer, right? I have one deck that I absolutely loved. I actually waited for it to follow the artist as it was getting done. It's called Tarot Illuminati, I think, and I still love it. I still love it. It's a wonderful deck. However, I used it maybe once because the cards themselves they're not coated, and they're a little bit big, and it just, you know, was uncomfortable for me to use them. And I didn't want to ruin them because they're beautiful. I didn't want to, you know, ruin them. So I've used those literally maybe twice, and then they're just sort of an art piece, almost a deck that you have. But we're talking about decks that you want to be able to use, that you want to use in your readings for yourself or other people. So how do you choose? Well, if you're going from tutorials that I have been giving, you do want something that's based on Rider Waite. And you can see in many of my decks, they are based on Rider Waite. Even this deck that is these silhouettes, which I love, is based, you can see, on Rider Waite. Even things like the Golden Tarot, which is this beautiful art the artists use these beautiful artworks, they're still based on Rider Waite. And, you know, most decks are, but some definitely aren't. And so, again, if you're willing to take the time to learn, you can definitely use those, and you should if you're sort of drawn to them. You can see I've got two different types of three different types of animal-based tarot, but two that are actually based on dog. This one, dog tarot, has fewer cards, in fact, far fewer than a traditional deck. And this other one is a traditional deck in the sense that it has the same number of cards and the traditional suits. And I use that far more often. The other one's almost kind of like a novelty deck for me, but the other tarot deck based on dogs I use a lot, almost exclusively in pet readings. But that is something that sort of speaks to me. I love animals and I love dogs. I love cats too, but I'm allergic to them, so I've never had cats. But actually, she's working on and maybe done now a cat deck. So if that's something that appeals to you, whether or not you're doing anything related to animals, it may be a deck that you want to work with. And that's the thing with tarot decks. That's what you really want, is to feel some sort of connection. Either you just like the illustrations because they're familiar to you, they have the symbolism that you enjoy and can sort of get excited about learning about, or the imagery speaks to you on some other level. There are many tarot decks that are based on sort of mythologies of various kind, or different kinds of aspects that may appeal to you. There's like fairies and there's elves, there's different kind of animals, there's stuff that's based on different works of literature and art, and they're all lovely, and they all I'm sure are produced with a lot of thought and a lot of positive energy. So if they speak to you, definitely grab it and purchase it and try and work with it for a while and see if it works with you on all levels. Does it work for you on the level of you know relating to the imagery, but also does it work for you as far as manipulation? Can you hold the cards? Can you easily shuffle them? Can you easily, do a spread with them? Or do you find that although you like the imagery and so forth, it's just not quite working for you? Now, I have some decks that I rarely use, but I do use them, but that I still love and kind of use for special occasions. Sometimes when I get together with friends or family, especially, I'll use them. And I would say that my absolute favorite deck ever, as far as artwork and imagery and uh, everything coming together, is my Dali Tarot. And this is tarot that was produced by Salvador Dali using this famous artworks, and then, as he often did, adding to them, and then building these new and wonderful and very detailed interpretations. In fact, as you can see, all of these tarot decks tend to come with some sort of booklet or book. And if they vary greatly and away from the Rider Waite symbolism, generally their book will be quite thick. The Golden Tarot, even though it is based on Rider Waite, has these wonderful artworks that it explains. So that book is quite thick. And the Dali Tarot, I mean, it's Dali, right? So this book is very extensive. You can see, first of all, it's in several languages, so it's thick for that reason, but it also explains the artwork, what's going on, the meaning behind it. It's just lovely and wonderful. And I haven't read enough with it to like memorize everything. That would take years. So whenever I do a reading using the Dali Tarot, and as I said, it's usually for family or friends, and sometimes, you'll do a reading and you'll feel sort of drawn to a different deck of cards. But when I use this Dali Tarot, I always refer to the book because there's so much information in there. And then usually, just as with any reading, you have your intuition, so you build on that. But I always start with that. And when you get a new deck, it's wonderful and it's fine, and it's great that you can refer to the artist's booklet that comes with it. So that's a real resource. And I will say too that often when you're reading, if you have more than one deck, and I used to carry a bag with like all my decks around if I was going someplace where I was going to read, especially in a group of people that I knew. This is not the best practice if you're doing this in your professional reading setting, just because it's time consuming and it's a little bit overwhelming for clients. But I used to have all of my decks, and depending on the person, I might feel like I should use this deck or this other deck. Often when I was reading for men, I would feel like this silhouette deck was particularly appropriate. And you can see how that might be. So this Mother Peace deck that I have, the round cards, it's beautiful, wonderful, very divine feminine and very sort of primal energy to it. And I would have exclusively used this when I'm reading for women, but again, usually just friends or family. It's not like I want to have a deck of 15 decks behind me when I'm reading for somebody in person and say choose one. It's incumbent upon you to do that because you're doing the reading. And even though you feel like a deck might be appropriate for a certain person, as I have with like Dali or the Silhouette or the Mother Peace Tarot, it really is you doing the reading. So it's important that you feel drawn to the cards and you feel comfortable with those cards. And that's why in going through, as you're scrolling through Amazon or, whatever place you're scrolling through looking for a deck, it's important to just, first of all, at the very beginning, look at what you're drawn to. What do you like? What do you like about the cards, that the instant that you see them, what do you think about it? Are you drawn toward it, or are you sort of put off by it? And that's where you begin, because that's the thing that's going to be the most important. Do you feel comfortable with it? Does it make you feel connected to the spirit world so that you're able to feel that as you read with this certain deck of cards? Do you have to have one deck that you read with all the time? No. If you have 2, 3, 4, 5 decks that you're comfortable with, of course. I mean, this is about your connection, what makes you feel comfortable, what brings that connection to you, so it's really, it's up to you. There's not a right or wrong here. It's what you enjoy, what you feel comfortable with, and what helps you to feel connected to your client and your spirit guides and their spirit guides. So try, if you're able to, many things. If not, scroll through for a day or 2 or 3 or 4, however long it takes, until you can narrow the field down and feel something that you're comfortable with. I'll also say that there are, oracle decks as well. And oracle decks are a little bit different. Generally, there's far fewer cards than in a tarot deck, and they usually do come with a booklet that talks about each of the cards meeting. You can see I have some Colette Baron Reid cards here. I have some John Holland cards here, and I've enjoyed them, using them for myself and every once in a while for somebody else, not in a client type reading, but with friends and family and just enjoying it. And I got them because I liked the person. I liked the artwork fairly well, but I like John Holland and I like Colette Baron Reid. I have some past life cards that are from Brian Weiss, and I've talked about Brian Weiss and his books and other readings in our in other videos. In one of our Psychic Sisters videos, we talked about Brian Weiss's work and some of his books. And these past life cards are very interesting. But these cards are very much the making of the author. And so their books include these meanings that are specific to these cards. And they're wonderful to use, and they're fun to use for me. And they can be quite informative, especially because some of these cards talk about specific things. Sometimes they're romance cards, or sometimes they're about specific life circumstances that you would use them with, as with like past life cards. They're quite specific. So those are, and you may choose to work with them as you go through and learn more and more and experiment more and more. You may choose to work quite a bit with oracle cards. as I said, I enjoy them, but for doing client work and even for reading for myself, I stick with generally one deck, which is this Universal Rider-Waite deck. Now, for pet readings, as I said, I have the Dog Tarot. For past life readings, which is something I really enjoy doing, I use almost exclusively the Russian Tarot of St. Petersburg. That is something that US Games produces. And I love them because they just, they have that old imagery, that old looking imagery, and they feel um, appropriate for past life readings. And I enjoy that I get more out of them for past life readings. So that is something that as you go along too, you may find that there are certain things, certain cards that speak to you for certain people and for certain types of readings and in certain circumstances. So again, it's really, I mean, I hate to give a video where it's informative and I'm just saying it's up to you, but it is up to you, because as with all things tarot, as with this cardvoyant idea where we're using cards to be in touch with our clairvoyant nature, we're talking about connection. And so what helps us connect is what appeals to us, what we feel comfortable with, and what we enjoy using. I mean, that all fosters this connection. So begin with, as you choose a deck, what really speaks to you, what makes you happy, because that lifts your vibration. So if what makes you happy are fairies, or some sort of that sort of mystical kind of look, or if it's much more modern, because there are plenty of tarot decks that are based on, I know there's one that's like based around sort of the idea of housewives, like day to day, that kind of thing. There are some that are like steampunk. I've seen steampunk cards. And if that appeals to you, if it makes you happy, if it makes you feel, if it makes you take joy in what you're doing, then that is a perfect deck for you. And as I said, so many are going to be based on Rider-Waite, even if it's loosely. So you'll be able to use them immediately as as you've gone through the tutorials. You'll be able to use them immediately, and they may have because they resonate so well with you, they may come to have deeper meaning for you. You expand even on what the artist or the Rider-Waite symbolism has in mind. You can expand on that with your own personal connection. And that's really what this is all about. And that's the whole purpose of any kind of thing like this, tarot or any kind of other psychic tool that you use, is that the purpose is to help foster that connection, and so receive help and guidance in this life from the non-physical world. So choose a deck that you feel drawn to, that you literally are comfortable with in working with, and that you want to take the time to sort of be involved with, and it will be good for you. It will work for you, and hopefully someday you'll have a crazy collection like I do, but you will have one or two or three sort of go-to decks that work for you. Now you may work with some for years and then choose to sort of move on to something else, and that's all good. I mean, that's all perfect, because the more you do this, the more you know what works for you. So begin by choosing something that you think will work for you and go from there. And I guarantee that when you feel good about it, it will work for you. And it will be a wonderful experience getting to know these cards. So there you have it. There's some information about choosing a deck. I hope it's helpful. I'll be doing another video like this, talking about shuffling and spreads very soon. If there are other topics that you would like me to cover, in this sort of tarot tutorial topics, please just let me know in the comments, and we'll see how much we can cover. So until next time, I will just say take care of yourself, take care of others. I'm Kris, and I'm your Cardvoyant, and bye for now.